The liberals aren't necessarily less racist, but there's a lot of hypocrisy, and Dr. King talked about that. Just a reminder as we celebrate Dr. King's birth today that racism still exists. Racism is still strong in America, and liberal racism is very real. Liberals want us to give them a free pass because they march around with Black Lives Matter banners and they help to desegregate, especially people in the North. They help to desegregate the buses and the Voting Rights Act. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. The racism that we see now is much more entrenched and is systemic in things like housing disparities, education, and even jobs. And Dr. King recognized that. And that was what he began to discuss in the years before he was assassinated. He said that economics is the real cause of racism, and that in the North, it's easier to mask, and so there's a lot of hypocrisy. The liberals aren't necessarily less racist, but there's a lot of hypocrisy, and Dr. King talked about that.
Was there something hypocritical about the fact that the South existed and the North could point the finger, and then when the Civil Rights Acts were passed in the early 60s, you couldn't point the finger anymore?
Well, there was no doubt about the hypocrisy of large segments of the nation on the whole question of racial equality. I think the best example is that many of the senators from the North and the West, and congressmen generally, who voted for civil rights legislation in 64 and even 65 with the Voting Rights Bill, refused last year to vote for civil rights legislation because it dealt with an issue applicable to the North, the whole housing question. And this, it seems to me, was the greatest expression of the hypocrisy of many of our citizens and many of the senators and congressmen of the North.